with Legacy. It's an honor and a pleasure. Good morning. Good morning for those who are just joining us. Happy Thursday to you. It's November 12th, one day after Veterans Day. So for those who are veterans and have family members who are veterans, I'm wishing you a belated and happy honor and pleasure. Good morning. Good morning for those who are just joining us. Happy Thursday to you. It's November 12th, one day after Veterans Day. So for those who are veterans and have family members who are veterans, I'm wishing you a belated and happy honor and pleasure. Good morning. Good morning for those who are just joining us. Happy Thursday. Okay, so thank you so much. Who is thank you. Regent Young, are you able to hear me okay?
I hear you well, yes.
Okay, excellent. So I was welcoming the audience. Welcome to our launch of our LegacyED News. It's an honor and a pleasure to have the opportunity to kick off with our esteemed and loved educator, Dr. Lester Young, and he is in the New York State Board of Regents and a 30+ year career advocating on behalf of our children and on behalf of our educators. So I'm going to let Dr. Young introduce himself, and then we'll give you some updates around what's happening in the world in education. And today our goal is to talk about, here we are post-election, we have a new president-elect, and we are now also still in this pandemic. So good morning, Dr. Young, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Bartholomew, and thank you for your gracious invitation to be with you today. This is an exciting activity, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to let me first give everyone just a few updates in terms of what's happening around the world. We know we just newly elected President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And certainly we want to talk about the implications for that for us as educators. I want to first extend condolences to the country of Ghana, who just announced today that they lost President Jerry Rawlings, who died of COVID-19 at the age of 70, at the age of 73. So our heart goes out to the country of Ghana and to all African citizens around the world around this loss. Another update, so we know that we have, for example, over 900 million people in the world today who are still illiterate, and half of the world lives on less than $3 a day. But yesterday, Alibaba reported that they made $75 billion in one day. South Korea announced it's the fourth largest economy in Asia, has announced that they're hiring part-time teachers to work one-on-one with their students who are being impacted by the COVID-19, and they're targeting their most underprivileged students. In Bismarck, North Dakota, places near and dear to our heart, the state school superintendent, Christine Baisley, has announced that they have put a $94 million resiliency grant that they will continue to fund and have funded in order to help their schools with COVID-19. I did the math, and so it looks about maybe $250 per student, but it is an initiative that's saying, hey, we know that there are challenges, and how do we begin to close the gap? And finally, I want to give a special shout out to the state of Georgia. And Georgia had some serious implications for this election. So the Honorable Stacey Vaughan Adams, she was the first African-American woman to be nominated for governor in Atlanta. Georgia has reported today that they have an all-time graduation rate, an all-time high, has increased to 83% for the year 2020. And that's important because they were at only 69% in 2012. And based on this conversation, as we're about ready to engage Dr. Young, I did some more digging. And so it turns out that only 3 of their CSI schools came off the list as a result of this graduation increase. So a special shout out to Columbia High School in DeKalb County, Stone Mountain High School, also in DeKalb County, and Zebulon High School, which is in Pike County Schools. And so Georgia, 83.8% percentage increase in their graduation rate, reporting today in the education news. And so now we get a chance to get to know Dr. Young, and we put no barriers on this, Dr. Young. The idea is for us to get to know you and to hear your opinions on the latest topic. And in this case, I think everyone is talking about the election news and the implication for us as educators. So I'm going to go back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess what I would like to do is connect with some of the things that you identified nationally, but also to place them in the context of the excitement of the moment.
Mhm.
There are a few things that are occurring right now. Everyone is very excited about the potential and possibility of the president-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they're being elected. And I would say, as someone who's been in the business of education, I'm very excited about the possibility and the potential of this administration. However, there is also the other side of that, and that is COVID-19. And I think what I would like to begin with is, as we all know, COVID-19 is devastating all across America, but it also did something else. It magnified a set of conditions that had long existed throughout American history. And so if you were to say to me, what do I think are the most important issues in this moment? And I say moment, and I'll explain why I use that term, are the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so what I would caution educators to not do is think of solutions in terms of silver bullets, because what I'm convinced of and what experience has taught me is that there is no one silver bullet, and that we have to understand, and I'll just use this one finding of COVID, and I'll use New York State. Um, we know in New York State that COVID-19 impacted different demographics very, very differently,
Yes.
right? We know that the impact of COVID-19 on Black, Brown, and Indigenous New Yorkers was very, very different than it was with the rest of New York, right? We
Yes.
also know that that's the same demographic that had the greatest disparities prior to COVID-19 in terms of health, in terms of employment, in terms of housing, and in terms of education, uh, mass incarceration.
Yes.
And so we know this. And so the idea of being able to report on this kind of racialized analysis without providing racialized solutions, in my mind, is where we need to begin. And that's why I said that we need to have a comprehensive view around what I would call the issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think those are the three big policy levers that we have a moment to get right. And I believe we only have a moment. I mean, if you just think of what's happened, um, yes, there are those places that are managing remote learning and providing the kinds of support that young people need. But we know all across America, all across New York State, there are young people that right now are experiencing an interrupted education. And so
Absolutely.
the question becomes, how do they make that up, right? How do they make that up? How do we use the knowledge that we have to figure out how we can fast track the pace of learning so that we don't lose a generation of young people? And so for me, the issues of diversity, our state, like America, is increasingly more diverse. It's never going to be less diverse. And so we have to think through not only how do we provide and ensure diversity in the workforce, but we also have to be willing to be more accepting of other people's truths. So that would suggest that there needs to be a diversity of ideas. And you can't have that unless um, those people who are making decisions, who are at the table, represent the diversity of the state. And so I think diversity is critical. The issues of equity,
Yeah.
we know that, and I don't need to define it for the audience, but very simply, how do we ensure that we give every youngster what they need so that they can be successful? And the way that I talk about this is to aspiring leaders, is that our goal is really to ensure that every youngster has the skills and dispositions they need to be successful at the next level. And just think for a moment, if that were the topic of conversation in schools and districts, how might that change what we currently do, right? How would that change if we said that we were going to look at middle schools, elementary schools, high schools, not in terms of do you pass the state test, but do you have the skills and dispositions necessary to be successful at the next level? And that would require much more of us. The other point in the last one that I mentioned, inclusion, is again, we have to be more accommodating to a wider um, perspective around diverse ideas,
Absolutely.
Cultures, uh, and I think our job becomes, how do we do that? How do it, inclusion is not just having people sit next to you. It is really, how do we provide the kind of accommodating environment that is more accepting of a broader range of diversity, of a broader range of experience. And so that requires more of us as educators. And so those are the three issues that I think are critical. And actually I think you could perhaps capture all of the salient topics under each of those.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Young. And I think that people would like to just see it as a divide between the strongest students and the weakest students, and not when you point to the idea that we need solutions that are also racially driven, right? So it's easy to just say, yes, there's a gap between, students who come from this demographics, and the gap is widening. But I point to some of that data when we say that, as the globe, that more than half of the world's population makes less than $3 a day, and how many of us across the world are not literate, are not able to read. And here we are in this country with a country with the greatest amount of resources. And how do we ensure that our children are not going to be left behind as a result of this pandemic?
So I would make a suggestion. I sometimes I think that part of our challenge is the way we think about the problem.
Yes.
When typically when leaders and educators talk about the gap, unfortunately, the emphasis tends to only be on students, right? And I think we have to re-examine that. So here, let's consider this possibility. Suppose I said to you, we were going to create learning environments where every young person would be successful. How would that change what we do?
Exactly.
Right. And so what I say is what one of my mentors said to me long ago is that it's really not about an achievement gap. It is really about disparities in learning opportunities. And what I'm convinced of is that if we can provide all young people with a set of high quality learning opportunities, then what we describe as a gap would disappear. And I think at the bottom, at the base, is, do we truly have the will? And I mean that, do we have the will to ensure that we really want every young person to be successful? I think that's where we have to start.
Mhm.
And I would dare say that some of our policies and behaviors and programs would suggest to me that that we really haven't addressed that issue and answered that question.
And I'm so happy you pointed to the fact that this is the moment and that we don't want to lose this unique opportunity. I think there might be those of us who might want to fall back. And I don't think that this is the time to fall back. I think this is the time to now push and demand an agenda in education and to put a 100-day clock. I'm in the midst of writing an article saying we need a 100-day clock for the administration because it is the office of the president and the office of the vice president who have to deliver, and to be able to say that we want to change outcomes, you're absolutely right, for our children, and do they have the will to fund it? And so I gave those different examples to show that in some places they are trying to close that opportunity gap for their children. And in other places, then the mantra is, oh, there's a budget crisis, right? So we have to let people know that our children and our families are worth it, and that we cannot just stand by and just, yes, the moment is what we're experiencing is emotionally hard, it's spiritually hard, but this is a moment that we have to now make some demands, and we need an agenda that is education focused. I also think it's also freedom. I know we talk equity, but I'm reminded of Banneker's letter, the first letter to Thomas Jefferson, and it was a freedom letter where he was saying that as people of color, that we have the mental capabilities, right? And I think the idea that there hasn't been a will to do it, it's a dirty way of an untruth. Everyone is talking truth, but this idea that our children are seen and that we're seen as having less mental faculties, I think we would have to now come to have some honest conversations about that. And what does it mean to see the beauty and the potential and the gift that our children have, and that all children have, but in particular children of color who have not had the opportunity and the access to the resources, to teachers. When you talk about diversity in workforce also, not just at the teaching level, but even at the university level, to be able to close this gap and to be able to move us forward.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. The very word vision is really about being able to see the possibility. Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right. In this moment, not only do we have to work harder, we have to be better. Maya Angelou said, you do the best you can until you know better. And then once you know better, then you have to be better.
Yes.
I think that's a mantra that we all need to grasp. The work ahead of us requires more of us, right? What we control is our behavior. And so at the end of the day, the only question is, what are we prepared to do? And I think in this moment, it's not going to be easy for the Biden-Harris administration to turn around a set of circumstances that are essentially part of the American fabric. I mean, you talk about the Banneker letter, the very notion of public education, some historians credit with a very simple sentence: a nation that expects to be free and ignorant expects the impossible. Well, that sounds right. And I think we can all agree with it. But when Jefferson said that, 80% of the children in the state of Virginia were enslaved Africans. Exactly. And so he wasn't thinking about them. In fact, he was only talking about white males whose families had money. Yes. And so from the very beginning of this idea of public education, at least in America, has been this push and pull on how do we make this a reality for everyone. Yes. And I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a very strong connection between learning and freedom. I mean, we see right now that there's a connection between education and incarceration. Education and being able to live and function and penetrate the middle class. And so again, the question that we have to come to grips with is how do we feel about the fact that we're in a place where there are these divisions, right? Where we right now know, if I said to you, if we measured achievement tomorrow, and I said to you, Dr. Bartholomew, tell me who's going to be at the top. You can describe, you could tell me. If I said to you, tell me who's going to be at the bottom, you could tell me. And I think there's something wrong with that.
I
I
agree.
think that we have to be able to be in a position to break the connection between past and future performance. And we have to have the courage to do what's right on behalf of every young person. And so that's what drives me. That's what motivates me. And I think, again, we have the knowledge base. And I think this is the other point that I think needs to be said. I don't believe this is really about discovering new pedagogies. And we are smart enough. We
Yes.
now know what needs to be done. The
Mm.
question now becomes, when are we going to do it? Why is it that if you go around and you can actually see that some young people have access to every math course known to man, and then other schools, the
Yeah.
courses are not offered,
Mhm.
or in another place, high level courses in math, science, and technology are the default curriculum. In another location, kids have to be recommended to take certain courses. And I think those are the things that we have to begin to question and understand the absurdity of all of it, and go back to the original point: is, are we truly invested, and are we prepared to make a personal investment in the lives of our young people? And I think that's got to be the goal and target for every educator in America.
I guess we're coming to a close, but I want to just say to you, I feel like if I'm encouraged by the will of our young people who have modeled for us change and reminded us that, right, that you can be the change you want to see in this world. And they don't have some of those boundaries. They're not asking permission. They are out there, but I think we also need to couple the energy of the youth with the wisdom that you have, with the wisdom, right, that you and other educators and that we bring to the table, so that now we can move forward. I do get the sense, though, that there is an opening of voice. And when you talk about visionary leaders and visionary leadership, we do have capacity, but I think that because there has not been diversity and equity and inclusion in these spaces that are making decisions, that the few of us who are there, they kind of shy back, right? Because historically they've been told maybe that their voice doesn't matter. So I would like to see more of our leaders raising their voice and speaking the truth. And as I reflect on that as a mathematician in terms of what we do, someone can say something, and if you choose to omit something, then it's not the truth, right? So for example, I'm in New York and they're pushing this, oh, we have, 0.17% COVID rates in our schools. Well, I know fully well the number of kids in our buildings. In any building, you might have, you're lucky to have a third of your kids. And so if they come around and test and you only have 8 students in your building and they were supposed to test 15, well, your numbers are going to show up really low. So saying one thing and omitting the other thing, right? It's not truth. And so even in this moment where we have this opportunity to move forward, we need truth, and we need leaders who are going to speak truth and who are going to not hide their voice, but use their voice for those things that you noted, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they have to use their voice to get to the inclusion piece first, I feel, and maybe I'm seeing it in another way. And so I'll pass it back to you as we come.
Well, here's what I would say. I am very inspired by young people. I think the young people of the current movement are similar to young people of other movements, and I've always been inspired by young people. And in fact, it's been the youth of the nation that have been the vanguard of most of our movements. And I think it's also important because it's the youth that can look at a situation critically and push those of us who may be ingrained and deeply involved and can't see it clearly. So I think it's important, but at the same time, there is no substitute for experience.
Exactly.
And so the moment we have to seize this opportunity to take the energy and passion of the youth and the knowledge base of the experience and figure out a path that ensures all of us. See, when you say that leaders should have the courage to be able to speak up and do the right thing, that's really about moral leadership.
Hmm.
And I think we have to be um, we have to be our own worst critics, right? Number one. Number two, I also think we have to have an environment where when the leadership is not behaving in ways that are in the best interests of everyone, that has to be called out. And I think part of what the young people are saying is that enough is enough.
Yes,
They're angry because we all see what's going on. And one of the questions they're raising is, well, why isn't anybody else angry about this?
exactly.
And so I think that the passion and energy that they bring to this is important. I enjoy that kind of dialogue and partnership, and I think it would be terribly wrongheaded if we were to take these old divisions, because I understand what leaders say. They say, well, wait your turn. I think, the job in front of us is too important for that.
I agree.
We need to make an impact. We need to have change now. And I believe we need to have the policies that would drive the kinds of behaviors that are targeted at outcomes. And so for me, I'm more focused on the outcomes than I unfortunately, we probably could have talked about this a bit more, but part of what I would say to the audience is this: we're not going to program our way out of this,
Mm,
right? So this is not about let's discover another program.
well said.
uh, this is really about a real change in culture and behavior. And I think unless we're willing to do that, um, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. And that means that we have to really look at, well, what are the issues? What are the things that we're going to target? As Einstein said, you have to spend most of the time getting the problem right. Once you
Exactly.
understand that, then you're able to, we have to be very careful that we don't fall into the trap of all throwing out solutions before we really understand what the problem is.
Yes.
And so for me, I think that is what I hear parents saying. I think, parents all over America are very frustrated with this situation. I actually have seen and heard parents talk about, one group of parents say, well, we've established pods. And,
Mm,
and in fact, why I heard one father say, you know what, and I'm paying for the teachers, and we got 7 children in the
yes.
pod and it's working wonderfully. But what about all the young people that we know that don't have that
Yes.
opportunity?
Yes.
And so why is that all right?
Hmm.
Now, I'm not, to use the language of the young people, I'm not hating what people who have their children in pods. That's not the issue. The issue is, what are we doing for the other young people,
Exactly.
right? And why are we willing to allow a situation to exist that's only going to widen the
Yes.
difference? And that, to me, is what we need to be focused on. And I would be willing to join with any young person and experienced person to help turn that around.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Young. Thank you to our audience. This is Dr. Selma B, Dr. B from Partner with Legacy. We are thankful to have Dr. Young to launch our first Legacy Ed News. Our plan is to come back every Thursday morning and to have a very open and authentic conversation with our panel experts where we get a chance to discuss the latest news in education. So please make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. And let us know also and comment and let us know your thoughts around the agenda that Dr. Young has just put out. He's noted that it has to be about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, Dr. Young, I want to close, I guess, this one piece with you. I know that the work that you've been engaged with around all young people, but also your commitment to working with our youth, our My Brother's Keeper, and also engaging our young people. Is there something around this piece, around next steps as you look to the next 10 years for MBK or the next 20 years that you would like to see our president-elect and our VP taking lessons learned from this work that you've been doing in New York State? What would maybe—
Sure. I'm going to start with the last thing I said. I think there has to be a clear and definite focus on outcomes. I think we have to be targeted around outcomes. This is, we're in a time now where we can't afford to just continue to do the same old thing and get the same results. We need to be very, if we truly want more young people to be college and career ready, then we have to target that in a way that we can actually assess, are we in fact reaching that goal?
Okay.
Right? Do we have more young people who not only are admitted to college, but are thriving and being successful? One of the shames of the academic system are the number of young people that graduate from high school and they go to college and they either have to take remedial courses or they fail and drop out in their first year. That's unconscionable. And I think that we've got to do a better job at what we are saying. The business of our enterprise is learning. That's it. And so everything that we do has to be focused around the idea of, are our children learning?
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Young. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your wisdom and sharing your experience and expertise with us on our Legacy Ed News. For our audience, we're wishing you a great day. We're wishing you a powerful day, and you're hopefully giving you, as our audience, the information that you need in order to engage as a parent, engage with your schools, engage with your teachers and with your educators. Wishing you and everyone a blessed day. Thank you again, Dr. Young, for joining us and for being a part of our conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for doing this. This is absolutely, I think this is a tremendous idea. Thank you.
Thank you.